Hello and welcome everybody, it's Stephen again and I'm a popular investor on the Etoro platform. So I'm going to be doing a video for you today. I'm really sorry for last week I was unable to deliver my normal video and the reason why was because I had a small surgery on my nose. As you can see, there's no bandaging on there anymore, but there was last week. So I was dying to do a video for you all so I could communicate. So here's a video today where I just explain a little bit more about what happened in our portfolio last week and a bit about the market news in general. So as an overview, our portfolio actually did quite well last week. So we were actually up over about 2.3% for the week. Which is pretty good if we consider the first of all some of the volatility that we've had in Bitcoin, as everybody knows, and cryptocurrencies over the last month or so, and also the stock market was a little bit up and down last week, and the S&P 500 was up about 0.6% for the week. And the Nasdaq was up about 0.5%. So all in all, we beat the indices last week. So that was a really good result. So as we move on to the market news and what's been happening, quite a lot of interesting stuff been happening in the US. The economy seems to be going from strength to strength, and there's been a lot of opening up of the restaurants and leisure and domestic tourism situation in the US. So some really good figures coming out of the US as well. There was some figures that were released in terms of the manufacturing, where the signals for manufacturing seem to continually be increasing from week to week. Unemployment also fell in the US as well. It actually went down to 5.8% unemployment, which was up originally at 6.2%. So we're seeing a lot more Americans going into jobs, and I think a lot of this obviously is to do with the service sector opening back up as well. Also on Saturday there was also some news from the G7 committee, and that actually they have fortunately formed together with many of the major nations from the G7 summit that have actually decided to work together to try and ensure that large corporations actually pay more tax in the jurisdiction that they're actually based in. So not a huge amount of details actually come out of that, but I think we should hear some more in the coming weeks and months. As we move on to Europe as well, the signs in Europe are generally pretty good. In mainland Europe, a lot of the coronavirus cases are actually decreasing as they increase the vaccination programs. UK is a slightly different situation because in the UK they actually lifted some of the restrictions back in May. So we've seen a lot of freedom of UK citizens being able to do a lot more things, and the cases have actually started to go up again as well. This is because of the Indian variant, that obviously there's large pockets of Indian communities in the UK. So this has kind of increased the number of cases. But the UK are doing very well on the terms of the vaccination programs, and now they're actually vaccinating people under the age of 30. So basically the whole population of UK, the plan is to get them vaccinated in a safe way. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses, especially with this COVID variant. There was supposed to be an opening up of the second set of restrictions for COVID-19. Which is supposed to happen in kind of late June. It's still on course to happen as far as Boris Johnson is concerned, but I think that they will be closely monitoring the number of cases over the coming weeks, and then obviously making a decision whether they fully reopen or keep some restrictions in place. Generally, the statistics coming out of Europe were generally pretty good. There'd been a lot of increases in terms of both travel, tourism, and also leisure activities in mainland Europe, especially in Germany. And Germany actually announced much lower unemployment rates as well in the country. So generally looked pretty positive for Europe, and the major indices were all up. As we move on to China, China's a pretty interesting subject as well, because China has, as we know, over the last couple of months, they've been kind of deleveraging their economy after COVID-19. Obviously, they gave out a lot of stimulus and help to businesses, etc. There was also some regulations around tech companies as well. And there was some fines obviously given to companies such as Alibaba, but also a set of restrictions given to a lot of internet companies in China as well. But actually over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some increases from Chinese companies as a whole in the stock market. But this week we saw a slight loss on the Chinese indexes, and a lot of Chinese companies actually went down slightly this week. But I think that's pretty normal after 3 weeks of steady gains. And I'm still very confident of the Chinese stocks in my portfolio, such as Alibaba and JD.com. Interesting. So also, if we look at China as well, there was also a mandate that was actually given out from the Chinese government that many of the Chinese national companies were going to be restructured and put under a holding company, which obviously gives the government slightly less control over it. Another interesting piece of information that's coming out of China as well is that they are planning to change the number of children per family from the current stance of 2 children per family to 3 children per family. And that is, a lot of that is because there is what you call a demographic time bomb that is potentially ticking for China. And what that means is that the birth rates have rapidly decreased over the years. And this means that over time, you're much more likely to have an aging population. And as China's economy expands and they need more workers in the workplace, this is potentially a problem for China. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase this birth rate by allowing people to have more children, and then later on, when they grow up, they can then contribute to the Chinese economy. A lot of analysts actually say that they don't expect this to make a big difference in the short term, because when China actually changed their policy in 2016 from being able to have 1 child to 2 children, over the coming years, the birth rate hasn't increased significantly. And I think it's going to take a lot of time for this kind of to play out. And I think that China is very aware that they need to increase the number of birth rates in order to support their economy long term. And I think that this is a really interesting development for their long term economic health. If we now look at the top 5 performing stocks of last week, number 1 and the best performing stock of last week was actually Canadian Natural Resources Company. As we know, oil and gas had a really good week last week. So oil was at nearly at yearly highs. So this means that it was a lot of kind of tailwinds for oil and gas related companies. So Canadian Natural Gas was a big beneficiary of that. The second best performing stock in my portfolio last week was Airbnb. Airbnb did really well and has actually done really well over the last couple of weeks, where it was up over 7% last week. And a lot of that is to do with the reopening of the economy and how well the vaccination programs are actually going worldwide. A lot of people are not only going or starting to consider to go on foreign travel, and they like the options of being able to choose their own accommodation and not be in a hotel with everybody around them. So actually bookings have actually gone up a considerable amount for Airbnb recently. So that's really good news, for the stock. The third best performing stock of last week is actually eBay. eBay has also done very well over the last couple of weeks. I added it to the portfolio about 6 weeks ago now, and they, after a earnings report which left a few people cold because of their future expectations, because obviously they did very well over the pandemic period because many people were ordering online, but I think that was overdone, and I think a lot of people are continuing to order things on eBay because it's convenient. And also, obviously, as the shops open up, there might be a little bit of a novelty value at first, but I think eventually, eBay's business model will prevail. The fourth best performing stock in my portfolio is a company called Big Lots, and they did over 6% growth last week. And the reason why, and a company that I really have liked for a long time and held in our portfolio, and it's done really well. It's actually a discount retailer which actually sells a lot of day-to-day items, but in bulk. And it's a company that I felt was undervalued at the time, and I still feel like it's undervalued. When we compare it to its competitors, such as Dollar Tree is someone that comes to mind. I think it has quite a low PE ratio compared with its competitors, and I think it has a lot of way still to grow, and I think that they are continuing to increase their profitability, which is great. So it's something I plan to hold in the portfolio for a while. The fifth best performing stock is another oil and gas related company called Chevron. And again, they had a great week, making over 4% growth for the week as oil prices surged. So now I'm going to talk about crypto and what's happening in both Bitcoin and crypto in general. So what we have actually seen this week, like the preceding couple of weeks before, is that Bitcoin has actually hit a range ranging from about 32,000 at the low to roughly 40,000 at the high. And we've seen the Bitcoin price kind of fluctuating between those values. And I think what's happening now is I think we're seeing a real battle between the bears and the bulls. And we're also seeing a lot of traders actually starting to trade this range, taking profits as it goes up, and obviously buying back as it dips. So this is kind of a real trend that we're seeing. We're also seeing a lot of stable coins actually getting moved over to exchange. So what I like to really call this is dry powder. This is waiting for the major whales and the institutions. They're waiting for a direction to actually happen. So they're waiting for us to either break out of this range or break down and buy the dip. So I think this is a situation that's happening at the moment, and I think a lot of the leverage, as I'd said before, has actually been shaken out of the market before when we had the previous major dip, and I think what we've been seeing is a real transfer of Bitcoin actually from some of the retail investors who had bought in lately and had taken either a profit or they had taken a loss because they'd got scared at the recent dip. And this transfer of Bitcoin has actually occurred and is occurring to actually either long-term experienced investors or institutions as a whole. And I think institutions as a whole is kind of the key factor that I really want to emphasize about what's going to happen in the future. So I've given my thoughts previously that I think that the environmental concerns of Bitcoin is overblown. I think that there's been a lot of effort to actually move out to sustainable energy as much as possible for Bitcoin mining. And there's been many use cases, from kind of wind to hydrogen, many different renewable energy sources that have been considered. Also, there is a huge amount of wasted energy that never even makes it into the grid. So if we're talking about kind of energy that's actually flared off in an oil and gas environment and actually wasted, a lot of this is being used and can be used in cryptocurrency mining. And I think what a lot of people are worried about is the more to do with the Chinese actually using coal to mine. And obviously this is a dirty energy and this has some environmental concerns. But this is actually a very small amount of the Bitcoin that's actually mined is using with this energy. And as the Chinese have actually put in more and more regulations around cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, we're actually seeing a lot more of this move to other parts of the world, such as Scandinavia, but also we're seeing a lot more mining that's actually happening in North America. And actually very recently, just over the last couple of days, we've had a conference for Bitcoin in Miami, in which Jack Dorsey at Square has actually said that he is going to invest in a Bitcoin mining facility in North America. So this is more positives to do with the environmental theme. But I think one thing that we need to know is that in a lot of these hedge funds and institutions, they actually have something called an ESG committee. And this ESG committee actually decides whether they can invest in certain instruments that the hedge fund or the institution wants to invest in. And is it environmentally friendly? So I think a lot of work has to go on over the next couple of months, which really proves to these ESG committees that Bitcoin is environmentally friendly and has a lot of good long-term future uses, etc. So I think that this is extremely important, and I think in order for us to continue our momentum building for the Bitcoin price over time, I think we're going to need to see more of these hedge funds come into the game. And this was kind of a core focus which I've seen in the many videos that I've actually watched of Bitcoin Miami this weekend. So I'm pretty confident that can happen, and I think once one or two ESG committees are actually convinced that this will actually sweep its way through the industry, and I think that this will open up the floodgates to a lot of institutional money. So I think we are far from done in this Bitcoin and crypto bull run. Obviously, when Bitcoin goes down, this also affects the other prices in the other altcoins. Obviously, Ethereum, Cardano, BNB, and a few other cryptocurrencies are also affected by this, by association. Another great piece of news that also came out of the Bitcoin 2021 Miami conference is that we now have our first country, yes, that's right, country and government, that are actually going to be using Bitcoin for legal tender, and that is in El Salvador. So the president of El Salvador actually made a video for the Bitcoin Miami conference, in which he said that they were planning to introduce a bill which allowed El Salvador to use Bitcoin as legal tender in the country. So I think that this is a really great, and actually it's something that I've seen obviously in the media and I've seen on social media, but I don't think it gets enough media coverage, because I think that this is an absolutely massive development. Not only because obviously El Salvador has over 6 million people population, but what really that does is it sets a precedent. So this makes it a lot easier for country number 2, country number 3, and country number 4 to get involved. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of attacks that actually come on them because of this, either from the media or from other governments, etc. I think that this is just the path that has to occur in order for mainstream adoption. But I think this is absolutely vital and as a benchmark moving forward. And I think we're likely to see much more innovative countries and smaller nations actually go in first to kind of adopt Bitcoin, either as a legal tender or to put Bitcoin basically on the country's balance sheet and hold in the reserves, just like they had previously held gold in their reserves in the past. This is really great, and I think what we're going to see is game theory appear over time, and the more and more nations that actually come in and are using Bitcoin on their balance sheet or as legal tender, I think that this will cause a surge for countries to want to be involved and actually get Bitcoin at a relatively cheap price. As we consider that there are only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be in circulation, and nearly 19 million of those Bitcoins have been mined and are actually in circulation right now. So the more we go along, the more there will be a rush to be involved. Obviously, this is not going to play out in the short term. This is kind of a multi-decade transition that will be in place, but it's also something that's really exciting moving forward. I've also been conducting quite a lot of short-term trades on my eToro account. So I've been doing a lot of cryptocurrency trades, which I tend to do in the short term, and I do this to offset some of the volatility that we've been having in the market. So we have quite a volatile day where the cryptocurrency markets are down. I try to buy quite close to the 24-hour low of that dip, and then I tend to sell off on the recovery. So I'm looking at a 3 to 5% increase, and I do this really to try to make us some incremental gains and also offset some of the drawdowns and volatility that you have during these tough cryptocurrency days. So that's been a very good strategy for us, and I look to do these quite regularly, very small, but I try to make a really high success rate. So we're looking at somewhere between a 90 to 95% success rate that I have on these trades. So they are well worth doing. Also, I've been doing quite a lot of short-term Forex trades. For people that have been with me for quite a while in my 𝗃𝗶𝗀𝗲𝗃 community, they will know that I also like to be involved in the Forex markets, and I'm also pretty good at trading these as well. And I have a very similar success rate, between 90 to 95% success rate on Forex throughout my history on eToro. So I think these are also very small, but they all add up over time. So that's a little bit of a summary. And I also just wanted to thank everybody for their patience last week for me not being able to do a video. I'm going to try and communicate with you as much as possible. I try to communicate with you at least every day. And I really thank you all for your supportive messages over the last few weeks, and especially over the last few months as well. I understand obviously last month our portfolio was down a little bit for the month, but actually it was pretty good compared with what actually happened in the market. So I understand if some of you may have copied kind of at the peak in May, that you may still be down on your copies. But what I like to say to you is please stay as patient as possible, and the short term doesn't matter as much as the long term, so stay patient. So thank you very much for listening to my video today, and as usual, if you have any questions, then please feel free to leave them below, and I'm always happy and approachable to answer your questions at any time, because you all are very important to me. Thank you very much and have a great week ahead.